In another universe, a princess leads a rebellion against a dark-armored tyrant. Finding herself in peril against his armored soldiers, a roguish pilot, accompanied by 2 robotic assistants, fly in their legendary ship to rescue her, while a ghostly being tied to a cosmic force helps guide them. Yet this is not the tale you think it is.
This is Comic Geek Speak, episode 1917. Micro-Spotlight on the Micronauts.
Welcome to the show. I'm Adam Murdo.
I'm Shane Kelly.
I'm Ian Levinstein.
And I'm Chris Eberly. The retro theme.
Yes. And once again, never a better suited episode to be throwing out a retro theme like that. And what better person to join us on this journey tonight than the one and only Ryan Drost of Star Joes and various other perfectly themed things over the years. Ryan, how's it going, man? Good to have you back on the show.
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for having me on. And Murd, you did me proud with that intro. That was fantastic. So
it's your words, sir. I just gave them voice. So
it was brilliant.
You for that excellent copy.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's not Star Wars. We swear, and we'll get into that and more.
Yeah, sort of.
Yeah, the words were not crawling past me on a screen, by the way.
Right.
No,
not yet. Wait for post-production.
Yeah, we'll see what I can throw out there. But either way, happy to have you, Ryan, and happy to have the rest of you gents for this long-awaited Micro-Spotlight. In fact, long enough awaited that long before Marvel decided to put it back into print in a few months, Chris Eberly was like, "I'm going to hunt down these issues and give it to me, Shane, and Murd to make sure that we all have a copy of it because it's never going to get reprinted." And then lo and behold, previews tells us otherwise, and but that and ROM will be back in print in the not too distant future. La la la, and yeah, can't freaking wait.
But I'm going to give Chris credit for the fact of it getting reprinted, though, because once you put it out in the ether that it is never going to be reprinted, that's when it happens.
Oh, yeah. So. Yep. Absolutely. And we will get into that and much, much more on this episode. And before we do get to that, we thank you, fine listeners out there at patreon.com/Comic Geek Speak for continuing this show and continuing your support of this show for as little as $1 a month over the past couple of years. I erroneously said 2 years on our last episode. It's approaching 3 years of the Patreon at this point. And I just want to throw, once again, that very, very great thank you out there to everybody who has stuck by us. We will, sometime in the not-too-distant future, be assessing the flood damage of the studio and making some changes in there. And every little bit that you give towards that helps that happen. For that matter, it keeps these virtual episodes afloat too, as that helps pay for the Zoom and a bunch of other things. So we thank you so much for all that support that you give. If for some reason you can't do Patreon or decide not to, you can still give us a monetary donation over at comicgeekspeak.com/donate.php. And if you don't have the means to donate, fair not. Tell a friend about the show. Let us know on Facebook what you're thinking about the latest episodes or Twitter. That's right, it's still called Twitter, or Blue Sky, or anything else that you so desire. Or iTunes reviews, whatever, or just tell a friend about the show, or your very, very tiny friend that rides on a dog. You know, whatever you want to do. We thank you so much for all that support that you give.
Hear, hear, Livy Poo.
Blue skies coming at me. Nothing but blue skies.
Yep, that cuts in my head every time I think about it.
That's what I was thinking, Murd.
All right. So let's get us started. Chris, I'm going to mostly give this floor to you, my friend, as you're the one who put this thing together in the first place, and I greatly appreciate that you've done so. But as we start off with initial impressions, I'd like to get your initial impressions and thoughts on revisiting these 12 issues in 5-issue form, but 12 issues.
The beloved Marvel special editions of the early 1980s. So let me take you back in time for a little bit here. So it is early 1980s. And at that time in New Jersey, there was an abundance of indoor flea markets. Most of them are now gone. And anyone who's watched Mallrats, which I'm sure everybody in this show has, and probably many of our listeners, you may recall at one point during the daring do of that story, our two protagonists sought haven in the legendary US 1 flea market, which no longer exists. It was later demolished. And Ian is just amazing. So as a young kid, my parents would always take me to these flea markets, and we went to US 1, and there was a comic vendor. And on the racks was a back issue of Micronauts issue 13, which takes place immediately after the stories we are going to address. I was captivated by the cover. Bug was on the cover. And my parents, as always, generously bought it for me, took it home, devoured it, and I was immediately consumed by the world of the Micronauts, and I wanted to learn more because I was basically reading an epilogue to all the events that had just occurred. And as Ian has already implied quite strongly, being a Star Wars era kid, I was immediately taken in by the Star Wars-esque elements of the story. But what I will say is, having read these stories many times since, as I've grown older, and especially just when I read them again recently, the Micronauts, I think, stand very much on their own. And for me, this episode has two goals: to celebrate just outstanding late 70s Marvel work, and also to celebrate one of the best comic writers of the 1970s, which is Bill Mantlo.
Amen to that.
So that's where I'll start with my comments.
Fair enough. Ryan, I'll shoot it over to you as our guest and someone who is very familiar with the toys world and what have you.
Yes.
Your thoughts on something that is certainly one of the most toyetic things that Marvel has ever put out.
Oh, yes.
Toyetic.
So my story is very similar to Chris's, just a little bit later than his. So I was late 1980s, mid to late 1980s, and I would ride my bike up to LA Comics. And to give you an idea of how naive I was to comics at the time, I believed that LA Comics meant that they were comics from the West Coast.
Nice.
It was probably that the guy's name was like Larry Anderson Comics or something, but I was like, this is comics that I would not see on this side of the country. So I grew up and became smarter. But as I was, I actually brought some visual aids for me here to help me through some of this, because this right here, Micronauts number 46, would be the first issue that I picked up out of the back issue bins. And it was very much, Murd, you're going to appreciate this. I took a look at it and saw these Lilliputian characters on the front and this soldier and a skeleton lying there, and this futuristic guy being carried off by these alien beings that were tiny. And I was immediately captivated, and I was like, I must read what this is. I picked up that issue and a few others, took them home. Much like anyone did in that day and age, it didn't matter that I had issues that were not in order. I just devoured them, read them, and had to get more. And I made it my point at that time because at that point, no one was really talking about Micronauts. It was very popular when it first came out, but no one was really talking about it since. And it kind of became my personal thing that no one really knew about. So it became a very this is my thing. And made it a point to go out and collect every single issue that I could find, and eventually collected the entire run. And then started reading it from the beginning all the way to the end, and have not looked back since. And surprisingly, even though I do know a bit about the toys, never owned one of the Micronauts
Me neither.
toys. I was so captivated by the story, and that's all I really cared about. But I do, looking back, I do love the toys. I still do not own any of them, but I've learned a lot about the history of the toy and everything else. So which we can certainly delve a little bit into that as well, as far as how, because that's part of how this story came about to begin with.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
we'll get into that a little later.
Nice. Murd, over to you.
Well, my story here is fairly brief because I don't really have a great deal of history with these characters. In common with, I think, almost everyone else on this call, I didn't own any of the toys. They were a little bit before my time, and as a matter of fact, I might even have been in my 30s before I even realized that the Micronauts were based on a toy line. I knew that Marvel had licensed the characters from elsewhere. I didn't realize that they were based on little action figures. I started reading comics in the 90s, and throughout the 90s, occasionally the few Micronauts characters to which Marvel retained the license, which is basically Arcturus, Ran, Bug, and Marionette, and Bug and Ran were okay as long as they weren't referred to as Galactic Warrior and Space Glider, respectively. And I guess Acroyear could show up as long as he wasn't in his armor, and they called him something else. But it was basically just those three characters I mentioned. They would make guest appearances here and there throughout the Marvel Universe.
As the Microns.
Right. Eventually, they had to chop the "ought" off into the name just to avoid trademark infringement. I came across issues of the comic in I have that issue that Ian has just put on screen here, the 1997 Bug special. He came from inner space and he's in your face.
Yeah. That sounds like the 90s, all right.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a little bit of story behind this issue coming out as well that we can touch on when we get near the end of things.
Nice.
So.
Trying to use everybody's favorite Caliclacian insectivorid galactic warrior as basically a riff on Ambush Bug.
Yep.
I think it was the aim of this special. Anyway, I saw issues of the Micronauts series in various back issue bins over the decades. Never felt the slightest velleity to pick it up and try it. But thanks to Chris's urging, now I have read the first 12 issues of the original series in reprinted special edition form. And I see that I have indeed been missing something special because, it's the magic of Mantlo, as Chris is wont to remind us, that he was able to take these little bits of plastic with their interchangeable accessories and, build an entire world within and around them. He, with a lot of assistance from Michael Golden, was able to just build genuine characters out of these little bits of plastic, just as personalities you care about, having rollicking adventures, well-paced, and more than a little reminiscent of Star Wars. It's true, but it's different enough, certainly. It feels like its own thing. And the fact that it's able to cross over with the world that we know, with that familiar world outside our windows, these special editions, each of them carries a little text piece from Mantlo himself on the inside front cover. And in the text piece to number 5, he vents a little bit about how restricted he felt by having to constantly cross the Micronauts over with the real world for the sake of scale, just to remind everyone, hey, these are toys. Look how tiny these characters are compared to normal people. Go out and buy the toys. But Mego folded in 1982. He was no longer bound to do that, so he didn't have to keep bringing the characters into the real world to do the Valley of the Giants thing over and over and over again. But for the 12 issues that we had here, the first time the Micronauts visited the real world, it was a great deal of fun. It was those stories set in the real world of Earth 616 that I enjoyed the most, actually. And I read these issues initially. We've been planning on doing this for some time now, as Ian alluded to earlier. In between when Chris first put these comics in our hands and when the announcement was made that they were going to be reprinted, some 4 months have passed. So I read these in the late spring, early summer, like late May, early June, in the backseat of my parents' van as we were making our initial treks back and forth between Stone Harbor and home. And it's the stuff that summer action cinema is made of. My thought is that it's just a damn shame that we never actually got an all ages appropriate 80s space opera summer blockbuster out of this, because this would have been, if a movie had been made based on this property in the 80s, it would be this fondly remembered cult film. We would have done a retro movie review of it long since such a thing existed. And so reading these issues gave me that kind of thrill. And I am very grateful to you, Chris, for recommending this book to us.
My pleasure, brother.
Excellent. Shane, over to you, sir.
Okay. Everybody knows I love Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
I did not initially get that out of these issues until Ryan posted his blurb, and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And I'm not usually that obtuse when it comes to things that mirror or similar to Star Wars. I never had any history with the books. I never read or owned any of them. I did have one, maybe two toys. One was Repto. I know I had that one. And one of the other just nonsensical Micronaut men that I don't remember which one it was. But that was it. I never had anything else. So it didn't really hold anything for me. And I kind of want to listen to all of you talk to find out what. Yes, that's exactly the one I had. Partially probably because it was flying with wings and accessories is probably why my mom and dad got it for me. Yep. I don't even remember asking for it, but I distinctly know I had it. I'm very interested to listen to you all talk about it. It's not that I minded it, but it was not as invigorating or exciting for me to read it. I was kind of bored through a lot of it.
Okay.
But you guys keep talking about it like it was really exciting. And I'm like, okay, maybe I'm just missing something. So I'm kind of interested to listen to you guys talk about it. And there are parts I did like, and the artwork was nice and the writing was fine, but it was a little bit of a slog to get through for me. It seemed to be redundant issue after issue after issue. And I'm like, oh my God, I just read this last issue. Why are they going over it again and again and again?
I think we have Jim Shooter to thank for that. In part.
Yes. Yep.
And that could be. So
that's a style of writing, Shane, that doesn't really exist anymore in comics. That you
and I love the thought balloons that we came through, but I just, oh God, every page I thought was reminiscing about something in the previous issue. Like, oh my God,
it was almost
killing me.
It was almost Claremontian in the storm with the powers of of weather, as if you didn't know that because we mention it every single issue. They had to drive that home.
In those days, every issue was someone's first.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. And the first issue, I'll be honest, I was completely lost the first half of this first issue.
Yeah.
And then I kind of figured out where we were and where we were going and followed it along well enough then. So I'm really looking forward to talking about it with everybody, to hopefully get myself to have a different opinion, to maybe revisit it again. And I didn't look into the series and stuff. I knew that there was a series out there. I had no idea that many issues to it.
Yeah.
I thought, holy cow, there's 70 some issues total between two series. I had no idea it lasted that long.
Yeah. And Shane, there might be what you're saying about the first issue might also play into why some things got reiterated over and over again. Mm-hmm. The history of the comic coming out was that Mantlo and Golden worked on that first issue and they were very proud of it. And they intentionally tried to make it extremely convoluted, knowing that they would explain things as they went along. However, Shooter and a lot of other people that read it said, we can't understand this. How are kids going to understand this? And they let them keep going. And they slowly started developing a lot of the background of what you read in that first issue, which might be why they kind of reiterated a lot of the things over and over again to say, hey, remember when we talked about this? Now we're going into this part of that. So,
okay.
Yeah.
But I'm thrilled to have them and to have the chance to read them. Again, I thought, boy, this is 12 issue series and that was it. And then I'm looking it up. I'm like, my God, there's so much more to it.
Yeah. Yes. To say the least, I kind of had no idea either that it ran as long as it did, Shane, until I looked up that information. And this was most definitely my first exposure to the Micronauts outside of, as Murd mentioned, appearances of Bug in Guardians of the Galaxy comics or other locations and stuff like that. I knew that it existed. I knew it was long out of print, and I knew that it was very much well regarded for individuals who were familiar with the property as it was coming out in the late 70s, early 80s, and that as said. This is as Mantlo can get, basically. Nobody pulls a concept out of their behind better than Bill Mantlo. Things that should not be good, but are, is what Bill Mantlo mastered in. And when you look at this, it really should just be one of those throwaway toy tie-ins, like something that you would get just to throw a reference out to X-Men the Animated Series, something that you would get, with a purchase of a personal pan pizza at Pizza Hut, and thrown in for good measure, and then move on from there. But that is not what this is. This is meticulously crafted. This gives a background to the characters that no one would have ever expected. Similar in that way to what Marvel did eventually to, G.I. Joe and Transformers and stuff like that. It really fleshed out the characters. Sure, there were characters that were created just for this, and, the war itself certainly didn't exist until Mantlo, made it happen along with Golden, because I don't think they were putting out, those reptile toys and thinking, well, this is from a world that was visited by a traveler at one point, and then eventually, no, come on, no, they were putting out toys. That's what they were doing. This fleshed it out. I will say that I do agree with Shane that of all the issues that I read, I think the first issue is the weakest, which isn't a good sign usually, because if your first issue rushes the way that I felt like this one did, and it doesn't grab me the way that I wanted to, a lot of the times, if I was picking this off the shelf, I may not have picked up issue 2. But luckily, because we were reading special editions here, issue 2 was right there. By the time you got to issue 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and the story, built itself forward, it started making a lot more sense to me. It's not my favorite by far, but I really enjoy what I was presented with here. And also it gave me a greater appreciation for Michael Golden. I've only ever really, I've seen Golden's more modern stuff, which is a lot more, I don't know if sculpted is the right word for it, but it's a lot more stiff than the work that he puts forth here. Mostly because a lot of the times he was just, later in his career, he's mostly been working on covers and not a lot of interiors. With this, though, he really gets across the kinetic nature of this. The upside-down panels helps with that significantly. I
did like that.
There's action in every single moment, even the still moments. And similar to what Merd said, I appreciate the steps into our own reality, and that he was smart enough to not even try to tie it into Marvel's reality until a couple of issues had gone on. It wasn't issue 2 guest appearance by Wolverine, which the 90s was very much known for. This was
70s would have been Spider-Man guest appearances.
That is true. Yes, absolutely. Instead, we get Man-Thing, for Christ's sake, and Captain Universe and stuff like that. And it really just enhances it more than takes it away. And it doesn't feel like they're thrown in there as, just guest appearances of the rest of the Marvel Universe because the Micronauts are as much in their own universe as they are in the bigger, quite literally, 616 throughout here. And I had a good time with it. I really enjoyed it, and it's something that I wouldn't have even really thought of going after without Mr. Eberly, pointing it out, and I really appreciate him for that, and looking forward to talking about it on this episode.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I don't know that I would have picked this up if Chris hadn't said, "Hey, let's read this." And just a little behind the curtain, as I am reading it, and I knew that the toys were connected, but I didn't know how closely. Yeah. But I'm reading it going, well, I like Star Wars. I like G.I. Joe. I like Mask, Transformers. This has a little bit of all that. Why don't I like this more? So I was getting mad at myself too while I'm reading it.
Well, a couple things also to throw out there that I didn't realize until I was much older. One is an interesting factoid, which is Mego allowed Marvel characters to come into the Micronauts stories, but they were not Marvel was not allowed to have the Micronauts in outside stories, which I found very interesting. And then I didn't realize this till later in life this was issue 8 was the first appearance of Captain Universe. Yep. So Micronauts number 8 is that very first appearance. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. because they brought him in such a way that you thought this is a character that's always been there.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Yeah. And one of my favorite what if issues to this very day is what if Spider-Man kept the power cosmic. And that you know, very much encapsulates just how far reached you know, the concept of Captain Universe has gone since being introduced in Micronauts here, because once you get to Spider-Man, then yeah, I think you've kind of made it in the Marvel Universe. So
Ryan, why don't you give some background on the origins of the toy?
sure. Yeah, I took so a couple things I wanted to show you guys where I got some history. One is this, you're gonna love this. 1978, number 40 of the Comics Journal.
Wow.
So this came out when Micronauts just started, and there's an article that says Marvel's Micronauts by Bill Mantlo. So this is right from Bill Mantlo's words and everything else. Now, another little sidestep is, and I didn't notice this until today when I was kind of flipping through this. It's always great when in old magazines when find hidden treasure, and I am looking very much forward to reading this. It's between the panels from Mouse till now, so the classic Mouse comic. So I am very much looking forward to reading this, which I had not done yet. So treasured piece there. And then you will also love this, Chris, especially back issue number 76.
Use that for research for this episode, my friend.
Yep.
nice.
And it's all your favorite little miniature characters, and there's huge spotlight on the Micronauts in this one. So yeah, going into the toy, 1972, Takara Tomy took and Shane, this might be where you get a little bit more appreciation. G.I. Joe 12-inch line was out there, extremely popular. Takara Tomy decided to go a little futuristic with the 12-inch line of Joe and made a translucent futuristic figure that they called Henshin Cyborg. And it was based off of the G.I. Joe action figure. However, after having that out for a little while, in the 1970s, there was an oil crisis. And if you don't know this, oil is a big factor in making plastic. So they started looking at, well, let's make smaller figures. There you go. And what they did was they decided to make a toy line called Microman. And that was in 1974. And it was extremely popular. So in 1976, when Mego was out there snatching up properties, they were buying Star Trek, they were buying, getting DC and Marvel and all their lines.
They turned down Star Wars.
They did. It turned down Star Wars. Although the head of the company says he was never offered it, and I was I don't believe you.
Yeah, they were looking for anybody to take that.
Yeah,
because he said years later after the success of Star Wars. So in 1976, Mego bought Microman and changed the name to Micronauts and released a toy line that was extremely successful. For 5 years until we just talked about it. Star Wars came along and knocked it out of there. But the toy line, like I said, huge success. It's known as one of the top toy lines as far as quality ever produced.
And not to mention all the accessories and sets.
Yeah.
It's enormous, the toilet. It's really enormous.
And there are little things that we'll see in the issues that are, go back to the toy line. So Mantlo he did try to incorporate things. Now, the unique thing about the Microman series, which played into the Micronauts and the stories of the Micronauts, was while the Henshin Cyborg and everything else were toys that were of larger characters, full-size people, Microman, the whole story behind it was that this is the size of the actual beings.
Yeah.
So they are not meant to represent larger beings. This is their size. So they loved playing off of that. And obviously that played into the creation of the story and everything else. Then we go to 1977 and a Christmas in the Mantlo house. And his son, Adam, got some of these figures as a toy. He was immediately captivated by them. and tried to, find out if they have a story behind them, found out they didn't. It was really just the functionality of the toys is what made them popular, and not necessarily that there was this grand story behind them. And he went into Shooter's office, and Shooter was looking for new story ideas and everything else, and he pitched them the Micronauts, and the rest, as they say, is history. But as we alluded to a little bit earlier, Micronauts' success as a comic book series convinced Marvel that doing a comic book series based on a toy line could be successful. Mm-hmm. And that's why we later on got G.I. Joe, we got Transformers, we got all those toy lines that came out as comic book series.
And to piggyback what I'm sorry, go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, correct me if I'm wrong too. Takara Tomy also did Transformers in Japan, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And then licensed that out to Hasbro to do all the Transformers.
Yep. Yeah.
Shane, I'm really glad you're here, especially for the toy stuff. Ryan, that was masterful, by the way.
Right. Good.
Outstanding. What I was going to say is when everything was introduced, like Ryan was describing, Bill Mantlo, let's talk a little bit about Mantlo, where he is at his career at this point. So he came into Marvel in the mid-70s, around 74 or so, and he very quickly gained a reputation as a very reliable fill-in writer who could write good stories very quickly. And obviously, as we all know, in the comic book business, especially back then, if you missed deadlines or stuff was late, all kind of havoc that caused with the scheduling and everything else. And they would try to have fill-ins on hand in case a regular creative team had fallen behind. And he got a reputation for being able to just bang out these fill-ins. So he was already getting a reputation as a reliable writer. He worked with George Perez. They co-created the White Tiger, for example, Marvel's first Hispanic superhero. We shouldn't forget Mantlo created Rocket Raccoon, of course, his most famous creation, Cloak and Dagger.
Yep.
He did a celebrated run of the Incredible Hulk in the early 80s, which really emphasized the Hulk's psychological struggles with his past. I'm sure Murd is familiar with those stories, for example. Mm-hmm. So this is a very sophisticated writer, a writer who really had a voice that was very singular. For example, today I picked up in my DS, this was the facsimile of ROM #1.
Nice.
And as Ryan and Ian and Shane were saying, all that ROM was just this Parker Brothers toy.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That was it. There was like nothing else. Yep. I don't remember seeing ROM as a kid. I'm sure he was out there, but I don't think
I had him.
There you go. But
I did have him, but I knew nothing about him.
And I don't think ROM made like a huge splash as a toy. I don't think he was around for that long. And just like with the Micronauts, even more so, because I'm reading ROM 1, which, by the way, really holds up well as a first issue. He just creates this entire universe out of this one toy that had nothing behind it whatsoever. Yeah. So when you see what he does with Micronauts, and a lot of you guys referred to this, the world building he and Michael Golden does, especially when you read all 12 issues, in one shot or so, it really is phenomenal. Because the Micronauts are these tiny little plastic toys with a lot of great interlocking, elaborate place sets and so forth. But like you guys said, there was nothing behind it really. Yeah. And he and Golden come in, and the world that I think they created is really impressive. And parts of it are, and I'd forgotten this reading it, until I read it again, really dark. Like there's some really dark stuff going on in this story. Stuff about like class and rich and poor, and the actual battles are frankly quite brutal for late 1970s mainstream comics.
Not to mention stuff like genetic manipulation and torture.
So
quite literally gambling for your life.
Yes.
Some of them just had to gamble to hopefully win enough.
Yep.
So,
There's a lot going on in these stories that go far. And just like with G.I. Joe, as we said, like with Hama 2, they take the properties and they just run with it, and credit Marvel for giving Mantlo and Golden the room. And as Ryan mentioned, I read some of the same stuff. Like Shooter and Stan Lee were like, what is this even going on in this story? But they didn't cancel it. They let it keep going. And I think, readership benefited from that. And another thing I wanted to point out is that this was a huge hit in the late 70s. Like Micronauts was like a big book, not for its entire run, but for those early issues. I'm sure Ryan could testify to this. The book was really popular, and it really was cultivating a following.
Yeah, so much so that it was one of the few titles that when they decided to go to the direct market, Micronauts was one of the titles they went out to the direct market with. So
wow.
And we should also you should also note that I'm sure we all know this, many of our listeners, is that Bill Mantlo, he left comics in the 80s. He became a public defender. I'm sure I'd love this guy. And he was rollerblading in, I want to say 1992, and he was struck by a car in a hit and run.
Yeah.
Suffered, if you see pictures of him online, he suffered severe cognitive damage.
Yeah.
And he's been in that state for like 30 years.
Wow.
And now Marvel, to its credit, in recent years did step up, especially after the Guardians movies, and they provided money for support his care. But I think that's such a tragedy because if you look back at it, and he has a large body of work from the 70s into the 1980s. He wrote a lot of comics. Consistently an excellent writer, and when he was really firing on all cylinders and at his peak, like some of this stuff and the Hulk stories and some of the Ram stuff. I mean, he was as good as anybody writing in comics in that time period. So again, I'm thrilled that we're gonna go through these stories because I think it's a testament to what the talent that the man had. And
to touch on the overall series too, I want to read some names here because the people he worked with is like Micronauts is a veritable who's who of comic book artists. Bob Hall did the concept art. Michael Golden worked with him. Al Milgrom did inking. Pat Broderick worked on it. Howard Chaykin, Gil Kane, Keith Giffen, Greg LaRocque, Steve Ditko, Butch Geist, Mike Vosberg. I mean, people of that time, if you were a known artist, you oftentimes ended up working on Micronauts.
Wow.
Yep.
I had no idea it was that popular back then.
Yep. And I'm thrilled to see this omnibus coming out.
And this was
forward to getting it.
And when this came out at Marvel, this was before Marvel ever had the Star Wars license, correct?
No, it was after.
I was after. Okay. Okay.
Because Marvel
very shortly after.
Yeah, Marvel. We did a spotlight on Marvel Star Wars comics some years back. We talk about this, but just quickly, Marvel was in deep financial trouble.
Yeah. Yep.
Like 1976, and the story goes that Roy Thomas, who had met George Lucas because Lucas wanted an adaptation of the movie before the movie had even come out.
Yep. And
Lucas and Thomas met, and Thomas went to Shooter and Stan Lee and said, "Look, we can get this property," and ultimately they did it. And if the story is to be believed, it may have helped save Marvel from bankruptcy.
Yep. That's what I've heard too
in that time period. And and to go back, to the points we're making before, they had such success with the Star Wars comic, which was reprinted multiple times, and all that, the Treasury editions and everything, that it makes sense that they would then give Micronauts a shot too. And then this dovetails into what we were saying before, that there are definitely similarities. How could there not? Because Star Wars was such a global phenomenon in these stories to Star Wars. But at the same time, I also think there are elements that are very singular to what they were creating with the Micronauts.
Oh yeah,
agreed.
As well. So
along those lines, and this is something to bring up just because artwork being artwork, and also it's far from the first time it's happened in the history of Marvel Comics, because obviously Amazing the first cover to Amazing Fantasy didn't use Steve Ditko's artwork. It used a cover by Kirby instead. What I find interesting here is that this is the cover. I mean, this is the collection that's coming out soon, but it's not a cover by Michael Golden. It is in fact a Cockrum cover with Milgram inks, and because we have the special edition, it also included this image inside of it, which is a original unpublished version of the cover of Micronauts #1. Penciled and inked by Michael Golden. And part of me wonders just how different the history would have been had they gone with this cover over the one that we all knew for that very first issue on the stands. Because this cover by Cockrum is incredibly striking, and also builds home the Star Warsiness of it all.
Especially Baron Karza and the way he's posed in the image. Yeah,
absolutely. Way more so than Golden's version of it. So
there's totally a Star Wars poster picture with Vader and hands reaching out over top the heroes.
Yep, no question about that. So a nice little what if you could maybe throw out there as to what could have been had they decided to go with a different cover this time around.
And as we're speaking about design, I didn't realize it till this reading, but because thinking about how this book came out in 1978, so Marionette is like Stevie Nicks and Farrah Fawcett. That's totally who she's patterned after. I never thought of that till now, but obviously thinking of what was in the pop culture zeitgeist at that time, Fleetwood Mac, Rumors,
Charlie's Angels.
Yeah. The hair is totally
her hair. That's totally what it is, and I love it.
Me too.
So, Ryan, did you want to start with anything? I don't want to jump in if you want to.
No, please go right ahead. I will say and we touched on with these special editions, the thing I loved about it was getting those additional insights to some of the artwork and everything else. And one of the things that they did later in the series also that they did in these special editions is some of the later issues you would get artwork on the front and artwork on the back. It was no longer ads.
Yeah.
I can't remember which issue it was that they started doing that, but I want to say in the 30s for Micronauts that they started putting some artwork and wraparound covers and things like that on the back, which anytime you want to give me more artwork, I'm all for it. So
Sure.
Yep.
The first thing I would bring up as I just looking at the first issue, more than ever, the Michael Golden art, especially inked here by Rubinstein, just blows me away. I think the artwork is just breathtaking in these early issues. And just the way he draws uniforms, I mean, there's a bit of a Flash Gordon element in some of the fashion design.
Yeah, I think so too.
The dog soldiers almost have like a Nazi type feel to them. Now, Karza... Ryan, Karza was a Micronaut toy, was he not?
Yes. Yeah.
So I don't think it's fair to say he's based on Darth Vader then, because he came out before that, didn't he?
He did.
Sure. Yeah.
He did. The way he's written feels much more like Mantlo played into the look.
Yeah,
so,
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Do we know what the Karza toy looked like?
It looks very, very close to what we see in the comic.
Yeah.
Coloration and everything. Was it as black as?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Looking at it right now, I'm bringing up an image of someone's Karza toy, and it is.
There he is.
Yep. Black and red are definitely the main points of his look, and are not a lot else going on outside of the four dots and then that one dot that I'm sure fires projectiles in the front. That's about it.
Mm. Yeah, Golden tweaked the
shape
of his helmet a little bit to make it more Vader-esque, but otherwise it's basically there. Yeah. And of course, the idea of his being able to shapeshift into a centaur at will. That's probably also Golden and/or Mantlo's own idea.
And one of the best, I think, design things Golden did here was that he gave that a hair-like effect at the back of his helmet, which I think only makes me look even more sinister. And Mantlo, in one of the text pieces we're talking about, these special editions, I mean, credits Golden for all the design work. I mean, really, obviously this was very much a collaboration. And you can tell how they're trying to incorporate the toys, like we said, in certain elements, but they're also creating a lot from whole cloth here for the stories as well. I think what struck me the most about these opening issues was just how they established the whole world of the microverse. Now, as Murder can attest, there was a microverse in Marvel going back to the Silver Age, right? The Psycho Man and all that stuff, Fantastic Four.
Yeah,
so
the Micronauts did meet Psycho Man eventually.
Right, exactly. So that's there. But what they do with this, I mean, the maps they come up with and the different planets and the civilizations. But what I found most compelling, and Ian referenced this before in these opening issues, was the incredibly creepy element of the body banks.
Yes. Oh my God! Yeah.
And how Karza secured power by basically telling the dying wealthy people that I will take the bodies of the poor or criminals, whoever, and you'll be revived essentially in these bodies. So there's this really dark, sinister element to all of this. And when you think about what is the basis of Karza's power, because he's 1,000 years old,
Yep.
Right, because he was Ron's tutor before Ron left on his journey. Is that it's based on body snatching and providing people with immortality, essentially, at the expense of people who can't defend themselves. It's a really interesting concept, and a lot more than you'd expect from like a toy property in a comic book. Really well done.
One thing to touch on, though, also, Murd, and I looked it up just because I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm right, but let me look it up, is that the Baron Karza turning into a centaur was actually in the toy line also.
Oh, okay.
So he comes with a mechanical horse, that you can then remove the head off the horse and put Karza's body on top of it, making him a centaur. So
so I'm assuming Force Commander came with the same kind of arrangement.
Yes, you are absolutely correct.
The doomed Prince Argon.
Yes.
His poor horse Oberon.
let me also bring up the some of the dialogue used here for the body bank. They strip our pride from us as easily as our clothes. That right there is some Mantlo dialogue. I love it.
And that's some heavy stuff for a toy line.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, not only that, is that Mantlo and Golden create a religion for the microverse based around Rand's parents by Dallin and Sepsis. And I love how when Rand returns and he's like, why are you guys using my parents' names all the time? Like, what is happening here? And just to show again how seriously they were taking these stories, a little bit later on in the first 12, they show Karza strangling Rand's naked wife. I don't know if you caught that in the panel.
Yeah.
When he murders both of them, like it's really graphic. And I was like, wow, I forgot this was in here. But again, it was the late 70s and the CCA had been, liberalized quite a bit by then. But there's heavy themes going on in these opening stories. And what I thought was great, I'd love to hear you guys' take on it, was I thought overall they balanced nicely those types of themes, Dallin and Sepsis, those types of themes with the camaraderie and even the levity between the Micronauts themselves. How did you guys think that how they established the main characters and their dynamic between all of them?
I mean, it kind of reminded me of the Starjammers, to be entirely honest with you. I think
I can see that.
I think that they were. It helped that they were already kind of like an established group at the beginning of the first issue. Even after our main character joins the merry band in one way or the other. It just kind of felt like they were, pretty tight knit, and it helps to establish who are essentially going to be your lead characters moving forward if they already kind of know and like each other and are able to jab at each other when necessary and that sort of thing. So I really dug that aspect of it.
And also, go ahead, Ryan, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, quite right. One of the things that I picked up too, I agree with like the Starjammers feel and everything. And I love the fact of these characters being thrusted together and being forced to work together. But I also got a little bit of a vibe of family, like a Fantastic Four feel, because you have a Croyer and Bug being like the Johnny Storm and thing in some respects. They played off of each other. They were the brotherly characters with each other and everything. And you had Marionette being the Invisible Woman type character, where she's, there's times when in these early days when she's being seen as like the femme fatale that you just, oh, poor her. And she's the just gaga over Ron and everything else. But then she also has those elements of a modern day Invisible Woman where she's like, don't tell me what to do. I'm going to go and I'm going to take care of business myself. So,
yeah,
there's a great panel in keeping with what you just said, Ryan, where they're going into battle and Ron's like Marionette, like, okay, you go do that. And she's thinking to herself, I'm so glad that he's just assuming I can handle myself.
Yes.
Great Mantlo writing, and they're establishing that she's not, like a typical early Silver Age Marvel female character. She's a warrior princess, basically, and that carries through very nicely. I thought one of the most strongest elements, though, of the character interplay was the bond between Biotron and Rand.
Yeah,
because Rand was in his telepathic state for 1,000 years, and Biotron would go to these different planets and act as his mouthpiece. So they had this telepathic link.
Yeah. Yep.
And I thought that was really well delineated.
Yep. Acquired some human emotions into them too.
Yep. Absolutely.
So that was, and actually, did you guys, I don't know if I was reading this properly. are Biotron and Microtron partially organic? They call them roboids, so I was wondering.
I didn't think so.
No?
I didn't get that impression.
Okay,
No.
I wasn't sure about that.
I think that's just their term for them more than anything else.
It's just like droids.
Yeah.
basically.
Gotcha.
It's just a different
rather
word.
than just calling them robots or anything like that. But to Murd's point, I believe it was Murd that said like they actually developed spending so much time on that ship and Biotron especially having that connection, actually developed personalities, actually developed feelings and emotions and everything else. And I love the meaning that, how that happened, because like, okay, fine, you could say AI or something like that, but this went much deeper than that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So similar in a lot of ways to the Vision.
Yes.
The type of synthoid or what have you, where at pretty damn close to being human, even if they are not human.
You will believe a roboid can cry. And there is one bit where a caption literally says that Biotron sees Arcturus Rand getting captured or his ship just blowing up or something, and he cries the cold tears of a machine or something like that.
Yeah.
The other element in the early issues that I thought really struck me as great character development was, and I have to say his name dramatically because it's such a great name, Prince Shaitan. So the fact that Shaitan has turned against his brother and brainwashed his entire race to serve Karza. But as the story goes on, you see what it really almost like a pathetic, tragic character is, because he's obviously been mistreated, or he believed he was being mistreated.
Right.
Throughout his
Several
entire
characters
life.
say it was all in his own head that he had been discriminated against.
Ackroyd actually said to him at one point, like, I never called you that. But he's such a pathetic character. And of course, what happens to him and their final confrontation. I thought by the time we get to the latter issues, the Ackroyd character, I mean, Spartak, they're Spartans, basically. But I loved how he's struggling with, okay, I'm the king, but I really just want peace. And I thought some of Mantlo's strongest writing is with that character and the world around him and the world mind and all of that. So.
Right.
Yeah.
One connection that I made with Shaitan also, and I feel like it feels kind of obvious based on his name, but like how he was treated and everything else, I almost feel like it was a play off of Satan or Lucifer, because he is the neglected brother. He's the one that feels like he's been wronged, even though he never has been. And then we see his fall because of that. So I just felt like, okay, they're playing on that name a bit. So I'm wondering if
wouldn't pick that one up.
did that or not. So
yeah.
And
Ryan, I'm gonna utter one of my immortal CGS phrases. I'm glad you're here.
two things of note with Prince Shaitan. One, the design for Prince Shaitan, I'm pretty sure was stolen in Wildcats years later. Because
you think?
I feel like he looks a lot like the main villain. At least from what I'm remembering. I mean, obviously with more spikes and what have you. But in fact, it even reminds me a little bit of Strife with the helmet.
Oh yeah.
So
good point.
Certainly, a character design that has been used other times in other forms in comics. The other thing, we've mentioned Star Wars. It's also very fourth world, and it's comes across the most, I feel like, in this brotherly rivalry here. As well as with World Mine and stuff like that, where elements like that very, very much remind me of Kirby's Fourth World and the characters that were introduced there, one way or the other. So another.
Funny you should mention that, because they actually wanted to get Kirby to draw Micronauts at one point.
Wow.
Before they got to Golden, they were going through the list of artists, and Kirby
was back at Marvel in that time period, for that brief period. Yep.
So they were trying to convince him to do it, and he couldn't. So
wow.
Well, I was reading in one of the text pieces that apparently Goldman was being pressured to draw more like Kirby as the series progressed. And what I've noticed is interesting is that when he's inked by Rubinstein versus inked by Milgram, I think the art is very different.
yes.
My personal preference is the Rubinstein inking for me. I just find it a lot more compelling. But What'd you guys think of his artwork? I mean, I think his artwork is revelatory in this
I
book.
thought it was fantastic.
Yeah.
The artwork was great. I'd like to see one of the original issues and a paper that went on, because sometimes these being reprints, some of the pages seemed a little bit blurry to me. And the paper was extremely shiny even for that time. So just my personal taste, that distracted me from it. But I'd like to see what it was printed on originally and how it looked in its original form.
Oh, you should mention that.
Oh, he's got number one.
There we go.
So it's very newsprinty.
1970s newsprint, Shane.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Which is probably what I would remember from the Star Wars ones looking like that too.
Yes, it does have that same type of look and feel as far as the artwork and everything. So
okay.
And in comparison, this is the general look and feel of the special editions, which, as Shane puts, definitely a glossier, thicker paper than.
I kept like moving around the light trying to get up a place where it wasn't clear. I'm like, my God, do I got to put sunglasses on?
Marvel did a whole series of special editions, all of which are great. We printed a whole host of classics. They did a Warlock one from Starlin stuff from the 70s, Murd. They did Captain Marvel from the 70s. They did the Steranko Captain America. There's a Doctor Strange one. There's a bunch of them. Whenever I see them in back issue bins, if I don't have one, I grab them because
I didn't know that.
They're great little reprint collections.
There's a lot about this time of Marvel other than Star Wars that I don't know, because I didn't read much of anything from this time period at all.
And these 12 issues are known, and they're referred to in later issues as the Karza Wars. So they definitely recognize that this was a special time for the Micronauts.
Also, nothing places issue 5 better than the fact that advertised in the back cover of issue 5 is the Secret Wars. So that's that places it 100% in time right there as to when this was being reprinted. Yep.
Now, as the Micronauts end up, they go through the space wall, I think it's called Earth.
Yep.
And, they're in the Marvel Universe. That's established by Man-Thing showing up a little bit later on. But what do we think about, because you have like the very Lilliputian, the dog, the lawnmower, like all these different, like how do we react to those devices of the story?
I was actually excited when it got to that part, because that's what I was waiting for it to thrust into the real world, even if it was just for a little bit, just to get there and have an adventure there. So I was excited. I liked it. It was very typical, very predictable, but I still enjoyed it very much.
Yep, I second that, Shane.
I enjoyed it. I still question the last name Coffin.
I thought that was an odd choice.
Good old Stevie Coffin.
Yeah, I know, right? But it reminded me a lot, actually, at those points. That was the most Transformers for me. Because of whenever the Transformers would interact with their human friends and what have you,
Spike and gosh, I forget his dad's name.
Sparky.
Spark. Yeah.
That is definitely the feel that I got off of this. I loved when the cat showed up, the angry hungry cat.
And then Biotron beats it up.
Yeah.
I even loved when they first arrived, and I believe it was Commander Ron said, like, reduce the imagery as far as the magnification of the imagery for the plants and vegetation surrounding them, and they're like, this is actual size.
Yeah.
And there's a great moment when they come upon the swing set, and Acreer's like, perhaps it has some sort of religious significance, and like trying to figure out where they are and what the hell is going. It's good writing. Like it's really.
And I think in that one they were very close up to it, and he's talking about the welding, and then they pan back, and it's just the swing set.
Yes.
Giving us like, oh, it's nothing.
What you guys think of the way Golden rendered the battle scenes on like the Floridian Highway and involving them and Shaitan ships, but also the police cruisers and all of that?
Well, again, I thought that was a lot of fun, because that's what we as kids would do with our toys if we had any in the car traveling along. Imagine an adventure while we're traveling, and what would it be outside, and what's it like in the car, and what are these action figures doing are they coming to life very much Toy Story like, although that was not a thing back then, but coming to life and having an adventure on your trip, putting figures wherever you were and sometimes getting pictures of them or whatever the case may be, that made a total sense to me and was just a lot of fun to read.
It was that sequence that made me first think that this would have made an excellent movie.
Oh, yeah. And then I started thinking Batteries Not Included kind of movie.
And I really loved how he would be zoomed in for like a close battle going on. And then there would be panels where it was zoomed out with the cars and everything else. And you realize how small that battle was actually occurring. Yeah. So I always
And there's plenty of cartoons and TV shows and different things that played with that too over time. Which, again, it's just always fun.
I really appreciated when they were running away from the coffin front yard and whatnot, and the next door neighbor is freaked out, and then decides that it might have just been the pina coladas.
Yes, that was fantastic. Yeah,
and also the devastation in their front yard.
Yeah,
which it's tiny, but there's the holes of explosions, and then of course they find the corpses of two of the Acro years in the wreckage of their ship, which I think becomes a plot device later on in the series, actually with S.H.I.E.L.D. and so forth, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, there's foreshadowing of that at the end of issue 12.
Yeah, off to a New York organization or something like that.
Yep.
Yes, featuring a guy.
Colonel
and another guy with a mustache and a derby hat. So we know where this is going.
Uh-huh. When Acro Year, again, they established he's the real heavy of the group. When he actually kicks the front of the one warship and stops it.
Oh yeah,
betrayer of worlds, and he's like the Klingon of the group, basically.
It's a good analogy.
Yeah. Just immensely fun. So, as you guys noted, obviously an important Marvel concept, Captain Universe, is introduced in these stories. Mm-hmm. How do we think they handled that?
I think it was great.
Yeah,
I thought it was a lot of fun because it was a father-son thing going on.
Of course.
So I liked it.
Spot for Shane.
And I liked after that initial battle, you got a little bit of afterward with him and his dad at the beach looking at the stars kind of stuff. Because I was like, okay, once it got to that point and they just kind of left, I'm like, oh, aren't we going to see the coffins anymore? Is that's just it, done and they're gone. But we at least got a little bit more of them a little bit later.
And the other interesting element of all this, again, Mantlo and Golden world building, is the mysticism in the microverse that comes into this element of the story with the time traveler. What do you guys think of that whole side, like that sort of mystical side of the microverse, the time travelers and all of that?
Well, I like how straight and to the point their names are. Well, what are you? I am a time traveler. Oh, okay. All right, fine.
That's what it says on my toy packet.
Copyright info, yes.
I mean, it's kind of very Doctor Who when you think about it. He's a time master or whatever. But I like the character. I like how it's hard to really strike down exactly what or who or what's going on with this. That it is part of the Enigma force as well. Is pretty good, but I wish there was a little bit more. I wish we got a little bit more of it. I'm sure we do later on.
Yeah, we do.
But
for sure.
But in this, it was I'm going to show up and be the person who directs you in the right place at the right time to help the plot along. For I am the time traveler. Okay, time to time travel to another location. Bye. See you later.
And I would not have thought of this or known this back then because these things didn't exist. But to me, reading his pop-ins and outs was almost. Even though they're both kind of villainous, one was Q from Star Trek The Next Generation. There was like the anti-Q where he knew everything and was helpful. Yeah. Like actually helpful, not just a jerk. And then the other one was from Enterprise when oh God, what the heck's his name? The captain of the Enterprise on that first Enterprise, Archer. He's battling the aliens that were linked to that futuristic guy, and you had that blurred image of him coming through time to tell the Suliban what to do. I kind of correlated the time traveler image with that image of the future guy on Star Trek telling the Suliban what to do.
Star
And
Trek.
what's great? Go ahead.
I was just to say, segue with that. One of the little moments too. I'm not necessarily a Star Trek guy. Sorry, guys. I do love the movies, but I really loved how they were monitoring the local channels and stations, see what's going on, and they got very entertained by Star Trek.
That's right, Microtron. Yep.
Yep. And I'm pretty sure that was actual dialogue from an episode.
Probably.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Well, they would have been able to get away with that back then, probably.
Yeah.
The other thing about the time travel, which I think was very interesting, was to get to the end of the arc, is that great conceit Golden and Mantlo is that they're all versions of Ryan from his journeys through this millennia he was traveling. And, the Shadow Priests, again, you think in the look at that art. You think in the beginning, the Shadow Priests are just servitors of Karza, and they're part of his ruling infrastructure, but really they're double agents who've inserted themselves, waiting for the moment when this messianic figure is going to return. They can all kind of reunite and then apply their power. I thought that was a great plot device as the story progressed, essentially.
Yeah.
And again, it's him taking a toy that was like, okay, it's the time traveler, and then he did something with it. Sorry, Ryan, go ahead.
No, you're fine. I absolutely love a mystery thrown in that eventually gets unraveled and revealed and everything else. And I'm actually okay sometimes never knowing what is really behind a certain character or something like that. So I loved the time traveler. I love the fact that how they used him and everything else. Yes, was it convenient at times? Sure, but that's sometimes storytelling. So,
what say we on Mr. Coffin of NASA's old buddy, old pal, who basically
Dr. Prometheus. Yeah.
Very cyborg Superman, honestly.
Yeah, very disappointed in Mr. Coffin for delivering his son and his dog directly into the hands of this mad scientist guy, and not seeing any of the warning signs of mad scientistism in their co-workers. They see each other frequently, and he apparently was completely unaware that his guy had gone completely bug house,
and all those guards were robots.
Also turned himself into a cyborg.
Yep.
Right.
Well, Ray was really having this. It's like he was having a midlife crisis. He was one back to his days of his astronaut years, and so that may have been influencing his thinking there. But it's a valid point, Mert.
Well, also to be fair, Mert, I think if I remember correctly, there was a bit of dialogue in there that said that they hadn't seen each other since that Coffin's wife died. So although they were, colleagues, I think they had not seen each other in quite some time, because I don't think he'd been back to NASA since the wife died.
And I think Prometheus had been injured in a space station accident.
Right, and it was his machinery up there that had done the cybernetic alterations to him. But really, when you get there and you see hell written in giant letters on the side of the building,
might give you pause for concern.
Welcome,
Human Engineering Life Laboratories.
Welcome to hell,
Should
everybody.
I really be taking my kid in here?
Now,
look at that 70s turtleneck. Oh, it's fantastic.
I love too how they said that no one noticed the name until it was too late.
It's not like supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. It's like 4 letters. That's hell.
We have both Prince Satan and hell. Okay, this is they're really driving it home here with the naming in this series.
Well, and this was something I wanted to mention earlier too, with Dallin and Sepsis, this playing into the religious aspect of it. They really use the words Dallin and Sepsis like Christians might use Jesus Christ. It's sometimes used as a reverence, and sometimes it's used as an expletive.
Great Caesar's ghost.
Right.
There you go. And plus, it makes sense because they died 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
So to Ron, it's yesterday, but to everybody else, this is mythology. Essentially, or religion. So again, great world building by the creative team here. So let's talk about Baron Karza a little bit. do we find him an interesting villain or more two-dimensional? What was people's takes on him?
My take is two-dimensional.
Yeah. Mine is too.
Yes,
throughout the bulk of what we read.
Yeah, right. I'm sure he develops. I mean, we know from the little
origin.
Yeah, included there at the end of the fifth issue of the special edition, which was taken from, I think, Micronauts number 25 or something like that. We know that he eventually comes back, and like something happens that he gets his power stripped away, and he becomes just Dr. Karza again at some point. And so, yeah, there are layers there. The fact that he used to be just your basic scientist, he was forced to be Rand's tutor when he was a kid. So there is a human being underneath all the armor and the bluster and the super science. But yeah, for the purposes of this 12-issue macro arc that starts the whole series off, he's basically just the heavy, and there's not a whole lot of development to him.
Oh yeah, and whether or not Baron Karza existed before Darth Vader, Baron Karza is Darth Vader, and they drive that home pretty damn hard in this. The relation to the main character. Although in this it's it's a friendship relation, but still nonetheless, that they are connected in one way or the other. That he's basically running an evil empire here, and subjugating the subjects and all that, while wearing a dark black suit and all that jazz. We knew that's the most Star Warsy-ish of the entire thing, definitely.
Well, and going into the two-dimensional, I agree, he was very two-dimensional in this, and yes, he does get developed even more later. And tying that into what we were just talking about with Darth Vader. Darth Vader in A New Hope is pretty two-dimensional.
Oh, yeah.
As a villain.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We get little hints that there's more to him, just like in this story, we get little hints that there's more to Baron Karza.
Yeah.
So yeah, they definitely leaned very heavy into the Darth Vader, but I was like, okay, well, that makes sense, because later on we learn much more about Darth Vader. We do learn much more about Baron Karza later on.
And sometimes I think we forget about how little we knew of some of those characters in Star Wars those first few years.
Yeah. Not
because we know so much.
Not to mention, somebody at my age, I'm about to turn 40. So like my first exposure to Star Wars, I already knew all this stuff about Star Wars. When people were first seeing, the first Star Wars, very two-dimensional, because they were setting up the heroes. They weren't necessarily setting up the villains, nor did they know they were going to have, 800 films and novels and comic books to flesh people out. So, absolutely.
The first movie stands on its own, and if they never made another one, it would be a fine movie that had a happy ending, and that would be it.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah, no question about it. And Karza here, it's not that he's not menacing. It's just, I want to see more. And guess what? If I read more, I will see more, because then they get the opportunity to do more with it. But this is the first 12 issues here. So set up the premise and go from there, and, kill him off, and he will never be seen again. Absolutely.
What I found more menacing about Karza was the totalitarian society created based on the vanity and like the lusts of the ruling elite of that society. So Baron Karza, in a sense, as awful as he was, he doesn't exist without him being propped up by the desires and the avarice of the people who are taking advantage of the body banks. I think that's one of the most interesting elements of this whole arc is what has happened on Homeworld. I mean, think back when the revolution is launched, there's a scene where Slug, who's the rebel commander, she asks the rich, "You're going to help us?" and they say no, and they just kill them all. Yeah, which I don't blame them, because they were. Remember, she says, "I just killed people who were in the bodies of my dead friends." That's pretty heavy stuff. It's kind of like there's just little moments in the panels, but I'm like, especially as an older guy, I'm like, whoa, this is there's a lot more going on here than just it's just a basic space operatic adventure story. He's throwing in some heavier elements. I mean, when they dog soldiers attack Spartak, they're killing babies, and they basically show it. It's pretty edgy. It's pretty edgy, and that's one of the things I like about it. Look at that page. I
have up on the screen here for those listening to the audio version, the original black and whites to the bonus poster of Baron Karza that was in the special edition.
And we do, and to your point, Chris, with the society that he created and fleshed out, you get a little hint of how he's kind of like a slave to that society now. Because when the Duchess shows up and she wants a new body, he's not the menacing Karza at that moment.
He's trying to pander to her, basically.
Yeah.
Well, you imagine that, reading between the lines, he needs the support of the ruling elite, probably, to stay in power.
Oh, sure.
Like, again, you've gained ultimate power, but as Ryan pointed out, now you're captive to that because you don't want to give it up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So then what compromises do you have to make to maintain your authority? And the shadow priests, he clearly was beholden to them too.
Yes.
Because they were like running like the religion of that society. So
he wanted to do away with them centuries ago, but he just couldn't bring himself to do it.
Yep. So great points, gentlemen. My God, I'm glad we're all here together.
I also feel like when you're talking Baron Karza, you almost have to say like Baron Karza, like a little bit harsher with a rolling of the R.
Yeah.
It's a great name. It's a great name.
How many different Barons do we have in the Marvel universe? Baron is, I think, one of the favorite things to put before the name of a villain.
So sinister sounding.
Yep.
Yep. Absolutely. So when we leave Earth and then we're full blown into the war, right, between the rebellion and the Micronauts and Karza, obviously there's a major focus on Spartak. So how do we react to Acro Year, taking on the World Mind and the whole way that part of the war unfolded? How do we react to that?
Well, first of all, I'm surprised that we saw Acro Year's, what's underneath his armor.
Good point.
As quickly and as casually as we did. He's just, when he goes into that chamber to become one with the world mind, he just strips all his armor off and suddenly, there he is. That's what he looks like under there.
Yeah.
And I must confess, it's not exactly what I was expecting. But yeah, it happened. And now we know that they look like they're made out of volcanic rock and they have no noses. That's your basic Acro Year. But yeah, the world mind was pretty awesome, I must say. Just the fact that his home planet actually becoming semi-sentient and contributing to its own defense, protecting its adopted children, the Acro Years. And just hurling rocks and opening up fissures to swallow enemy craft and volcanic pyroclastic flows being weaponized and frying the enemy. It was a pretty righteous fight scene, I must say.
And to your point earlier, Murd would have made an amazing wrap up to a movie to see all of that happening.
Yep, like the big third act.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the now let's talk about Prince Argon for a minute, because Ryan will know this. His character takes a really dark turn in subsequent issues. I don't remember if they allude. I don't think they allude to that yet in these first 12. They don't.
One of the scenes from a later issue that was included as a bonus in the last special edition issue. We see him, as a mind-controlled slave, leaping into like a pit of lava, basically, sacrificing his body against his will to resurrect Baron Karza. Yep,
because Karza will return through Force Commander, essentially. But the idea of that there's a royal family, and like the first issue is really focusing on him in those opening pages as he and Marionette are trying to escape. But it's fascinating to me how that they're kind of establishing this civilization where obviously there's a monarchy, but clearly the ruling elite don't feel beholden to it, because their greater concern is, well, we want to live forever, so to hell with them, and then they turn on them, essentially. But again, the political landscape they're creating, like little bits and pieces of it here and there, for me, it's one of the most fascinating parts of this story.
No, totally agree on that. And one of I always like to throw a little bit of levity into certain situations when Slug rescues Prince Argon, and he's like, "How did you get that into the cell?" And she goes, "There's certain parts of a person that even the dog soldiers won't check."
That's right. Absolutely.
And of course, that Karza was like, I have plans for Prince Argon. I'm going to make him a horse. Like, okay, sure, why not? Because toys, baby, toys.
That is a good point, Ian, because they have that really dark page where he's eagle spread naked on the machine. Like, my God, what is he going to do to him?
Yeah.
When I'm done, you won't even know yourself.
Well, and I even went a bit deep. Even as a kid, I remember reading it and thinking, like, is he running out of supply when it comes to humans to do replacement pieces and everything else? Is he now turning to animals and seeing if he could splice those together? So that was part of his plan with Prince Argon. Let me splice him with the horse and see, can I use animals instead of having to rely on a steady supply of humans?
Good point.
God damn, Ryan, that was some deep reading. Wonderfully done, sir.
That's deep for a toy.
Absolutely. I just got a chill. Cheers. Fantastic.
And wait, I mean, later down the line, I mean, obviously, this only covers the first 12 here, but, there's an advertisement for the X-Men Micronauts crossover in these special editions. I know there was crossovers with the Fantastic Four later down the line. Yeah. So much further integration of. And
I think Doctor Strange appears at some point in the series as well, if I remember correctly.
So to highlight, I did mark a few in my collection here. To highlight some characters. This is where we have the Fantastic Four appearing. This is in issue 15, so not too long after what we just read. Mm-hmm. We have also Ant-Man appropriately appearing in issue 20.
Nice.
So he's right there.
Guess that would be Scott Lang at that point, yeah?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
And then we hinted at this earlier. Nick Fury appearing there with
Karza's running Hydra.
Yep.
Oh, jeez.
This is one of my personal favorites.
He's a Baron. Of course he's running.
But now, he's running Hydra only in Micronauts?
Yeah.
Well, remember, Shane, there are many factions of Hydra.
Sure.
Yes.
Sure. Even tiny little ones.
This is one of my personal favorites because I always love the obscure. I always love pulling, something that seems like it shouldn't go together. We have Nightmare appearing as a villain, and Doc Samson also appears in this issue. So that was fun. Nice. Just a couple other ones. And yes, there was the miniseries with X-Men and the Micronauts, but the X-Men also did appear in issue. This was issue 37 of Micronauts. We have Nightcrawler there. And then Chris, especially I know you'll appreciate this one, because this is issue 41, and who do we have on the cover there? And it says Doom.
Oh, come on. It's a Marvel rite of passage. Everybody has to confront Dr. Doom at some point. I don't care if you're Shang-Chi, Cage. Murd, go ahead. Out of the line, please.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Luke Cage.
Where's my money, honey?
Thank you. All right.
Or are you going for Sweet Christmas?
So no, that's I think, did they meet Rom too? I feel like they did.
I believe they did. I believe there was like a crossover that they did with Rom. I know in later iterations of the Micronauts, they did do a crossover with Rom, but from the
early one, it's just a page. Rom, Micronauts, Rom.
Right.
Hey, how's it going?
Let's jump back for a second. What do you think of the Man-Thing appearance?
It was cool to see. Go ahead, Adam.
I was just going to say, I think you can guess what I thought of the Man-Thing's appearance. It's just, of all... I can remember years ago, many years ago, that there was a Muddle the Murder, maybe even a Stump the Rios question. Oof. That's how long ago this is going, that asked, which pre-existing Marvel Universe character was the first to make an appearance in the Micronauts series. And sure enough, it was the macabre Man-Thing.
There you go.
And it was kind of a great, low-key choice for a Marvel Universe initial guest star, because he's kind of like the Micronauts. He's off in his own little corner of reality. And so crossing over with Man-Thing doesn't mean getting enmeshed in a lot of continuity. He's just a shambling swamp monster that responds to emotions nearby him. And he made a good little pocket antagonist for that one issue, and gave the Micronauts a chance to flex their muscles, and little Stevie to gain some additional self-confidence. And Yeah, and we got to see Michael Golden draw him.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
This is one of my favorite covers of the late Bronze Age, Micronauts number 7.
Yes.
It's a Michael Golden, Neil Adams rendering.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I just think it's a stunning cover.
Agreed.
By
the way, to ask the question of when ROM and Micronauts, if they did actually cross over, I know wikis aren't everything, but I did find a list of like all the times that ROM crossed over with anybody on a fictional crossover wiki, and supposedly they did not actually cross over until Micronauts was with IDW in 2017.
Okay.
Wow.
I can believe that, actually, because after all, two different toy companies, two different possibly competing licenses.
Yep.
Yeah.
So until Mego like ceased to exist in 1982, I mean that crossover with ROM probably wouldn't have been legally possible.
Yep.
And if I remember correctly, the IDW Micronauts had very little in common with this version. I know Karza was in it, but I don't think there was much beyond that, right, Ryan?
Yeah. So with the IDW one you're referring to,
Yeah.
they only couldn't use the Marvel characters.
Okay.
So they still had Acroyear, they still had Baron Karza, they had a glider character.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it was a woman. It wasn't Arcturus.
Correct.
Yeah.
They created an Arcturus Rand type character with a character they called named Oz. So there was a lot that they could do. They just couldn't use Arcturus Rand, Marionette, or Bug.
And funny enough, where did they show up? This is a Marvel Universe Avengers Earth Mightiest Heroes number 7. The Earth's Mightiest Heroes comic book tie-in, and the Micronauts as the Microns showed up in that Earth's Mightiest Heroes animated comic book.
Wow.
Ron, Quark, Bug, Flare, and Marionette all show up in that particular issue, issue 7. So they've been everywhere.
Yeah, and
go ahead. Go on, sir. I'm sorry.
Oh no, you're good. I have all the issues. I'm going through my collection as I and sorting through things. So I did not find all of my IDW issues, but I did find the trades that I had. So it was interesting because in the Micronauts world, the actual ones named Micronauts, they moved on to IDW, and then the characters that were Marvel appeared here and there I'm sure to keep the license going. Sure. So you had one of their late appearances was in the Incredible Hulk storyline, just titled Enigma Force. And this you had Commander Ron, Marionette, and Bug appearing in there. And then the most recent appearance of those characters was in a story called Minimum Carnage.
How many years ago was that?
Not that long ago. I don't remember exactly when it published, but yeah, with the way symbiotes have been going, yes, probably. Yeah. But it's interesting because it's like these two paths diverged because of who could use what characters. And I can tell you for a fact, for me personally, knowing that Hasbro now has the Micronauts and that this reprinting is now coming out, there is a part of me that is desperately hoping that maybe we see a reunification
I'd love it.
of all these characters together in some new stories. I would love nothing more. So
I do want to point out that Micronauts series, by the way, Cullen Bunn was the writer on that. So just wanted to point that one out.
It's pretty impressive art by David Baldeón.
I can't remember how many they made, but Palisade Toys, when they were doing the Muppet figures, also put out Micronaut figures to a small set or series or a one-time wave of them or something.
Yeah, it's one of the things that helped in them filing bankruptcy because the Micronauts figures, they put a lot. They had to actually the molds no longer existed, and they had to reach out to actual collectors and see if they could recreate them. And the first wave was not done very well. It was very cheap plastic, and which is unlike for Palisades to do. But it was very cheap plastic. And so when they came out with the second wave, it was people had already written it off. And even though they improved the plastic and everything. So yeah, Micronauts, along with a few other things that Palisades was doing stretched themselves a little too thin, which caused the bankruptcy.
Yep.
So, one thing as far as a more recent appearance that I personally loved that they did, this was through Hasbro. It was at New York Comic Con 2011, and it was a one-issue comic called Unit E. Also Unite, but it was Unit E is what they called it. And it was a good friend of mine and one of my co-hosts, Robert Atkins, drew the Micronauts story that was in there.
Oh, very cool.
And it was the Micronauts were the catalyst for the rest of the properties that were in this. So you had Candyland in here, you had Stretch Armstrong, Battleship Galaxies, Action Man, Gem and the Holograms, and Mask.
Oh, Shane, there you go.
Yes. And what you had in this story was you had the Micronauts being the ones, which makes perfect sense. Yep, there you go. They were the ones that could traverse different realities and different worlds, which makes perfect sense for the Micronauts. And they visited some of these other worlds. And it was interesting what they were trying to do. They were trying to kind of reinvent new things with some of the characters. So Mask was, instead of being what they were more of like a rescue operation. So they were like your police force and firemen and stuff like that with these fantastical vehicles. Candyland was a magical world with like witches and wizardry and stuff like that going on. And at the end of Micronauts, you had a new character taking up the mantle of Acroyear. So, and the idea behind it was it was meant to be, and I believe Andy Schmidt was the one that was writing this, if I remember right. Mm-hmm. And the idea behind it was they actually put a letter in the back of it saying, hey, if you guys really like this, we did this as just a fun thing, but if you really like this, let us know, and we might see some more stories come out of this. And that just never happened, unfortunately.
Yeah. Somewhere around there, maybe earlier, maybe a little bit later, I swear during a toy fair, Hasbro had a one slide in their presentation that showed a lot of these properties as future toy lines that never came about.
I definitely remember that happening, Shane. I remember you mentioning it, actually. So,
I remember that you mentioned that too. Yep.
But and for that matter, a lot of those properties were also potentially in the pipeline for a quote-unquote Hasbro cinematic universe a couple of years back. Yeah. I know Mask was one of the ones that they were definitely putting forth as a potential one. More G.I. Joe movies, more Transformers. I don't know about Stretch Armstrong, but frankly, that weird ass design of him with the X there, that is not the Stretch Armstrong that I know. Thank you very much.
Yeah. He never wore a mask.
No, he did not.
And I think they were floating the name Visionaries and Knights of the Magical Light.
They were, and Micronauts was also in that pipeline of movies that they wanted to do.
Yep.
There's been multiple times that Micronauts was supposed to make a comeback. One of which was we talked about near the beginning of the episode, that Bug one shot that came out. Marvel was working on trying to bring the Micronauts back, and they were trying to get the license. They came out with the Bug one shot, intending that to be a launch into more of the Micronauts return. But they weren't able to get the agreement for the publishing rights to bring them back, and they once again got canceled. So,
and you know what? I'll tell you what. To go through all the, again, I don't work for Marvel. I don't know how licensing works in these situations, but to go through all the trouble of reprinting these collections for the first time in years, to reprint everything, to put out facsimiles, I'm really hoping that an agreement has been reached to make more ROM and make more Micronauts at this point, because I know Hasbro has been working closely with Image on a bunch of other properties, so it could quite possibly wind up going that route for all I frickin' know. But I sincerely hope that we are going to wind up getting more Micronauts and ROM out of Marvel in the near future, And
I think that go ahead, Ryan. Go ahead.
Please. I was just going to say, I think because there has always been a pretty good relationship, especially this current day and age of Hasbro with Marvel. I think the likelihood of that happening is pretty high.
Yeah.
And to your point, I think there's a purpose behind them reprinting these besides just reprinting them.
Oh, absolutely.
I did get they like to call it at my comic shop the spiffy, shiny foil variant of the facsimile, and I also got the blank cover because I would love one day to get somebody, some artist to draw the Micronauts for me that I look up to. So
Sure.
I had to snag those when those became available. So I when it comes to the comic story and it comes to the stories of the Micronauts themselves, I pretty much have everything except 2 items in my collection, which is I do not have the artist edition they came out with a while back.
That's right.
I wish I had gotten that, because now if you want to find it, you're going to pay like $1,000 for it.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Wow.
I looked it up like the other day on eBay, and there was one person selling it, and it was for $1,000.
And this is all golden artwork, right?
Yeah. So
Jeez.
Sometimes they reissue those artists.
They do, and I'm crossing my fingers that happens with this one. And then the other thing, they came out with a 3-book series, so a prose book, and I believe it's called the Time Traveler Trilogy or something like that. It's very easy to find volume 1. You can sometimes find volume 2. I have never been able to find volume 3.
When did that come out?
I'm trying to, I'm not sure. I know it was, let me see. I'm going to look it up.
Are these steeped in the Micronauts stories of the Marvel era?
Yes, I believe so.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
By the way, while you're looking for that, this was in the Michael Golden artist edition. Some of the artwork that was reprinted there, as well as some advertisements for the Micronauts coming soon. Love those Micronauts are coming.
Those are gorgeous. Wow,
that's some great stuff right there.
Sure, Ian. Twist the knife to Ryan. Look at all this really cool stuff in here. You're not gonna get it.
Well, and I will tell you too, Shane. You'll definitely appreciate this. The person who wrote the Time Traveler trilogy was Steve Lyons, who has done some writing for Doctor Who in the past. So
interesting.
Yeah. So
are those licensed by Marvel, those novels, or is it just an independent thing?
No, it's independent. All I can find right now is publisher unknown, but they came out in 2003.
Oh, wow.
20 years ago.
Fairly recent. Yeah.
So, but it is very difficult to, like I said, volume 1, you can very easily find. Volume 2, I've seen it a couple times, but volume 3, I've not been able to find.
And have you read volume 1?
I have not, because I really want to find all 3 volumes. Right. I'm one of those people where I'm like, if I can't get all 3 volumes, I don't want to get any of them.
Oh, yeah. No, completionist nature. We know nothing about that on this show.
Yeah.
Do we think this, because Murd mentioned this before, do we think this story...
I don't think.
Oh, come on. One of the best thinkers I know. Could be adapted effectively into a film or a series at this point.
Yes.
I think they could have done it in the 80s.
I think I think it's well overdue.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I can almost see the John Williams score in my head with the Spielberg-esque action going on as they're driving through riding through the streets of Florida while dodging cars and stuff like that. It's made for it. It absolutely is. Would it happen today, though? That's a very good question. However, 80s nostalgia has never been bigger.
Yeah,
that's true.
So you never know.
Yeah. Was anybody else mentally voice casting the characters as you were reading along?
No, not this time around yet.
A little bit. I could easily see, weirdly enough, like a Jack Black play Bug. Like he's got that like Joker humorous personality.
Bug is so much fun.
That would definitely suit him. I'm trying to think of who would play Ran, honestly, because my brain goes Chris Pine, but he already played Kirk.
Yeah, it was somebody named Chris, is what I was about to say.
Yeah, whether it be Pratt or Hemsworth or Pine, there's tons of Chris's out there who could probably play the role.
Who were you casting, Murd?
For Karza, Clancy Brown is kind of the obvious choice, but I was thinking John Vernon, who's dead, I'm pretty sure. But
wait, you mean John Vernon from Animal House?
Yes, Dean Wormer. After all, Karza was a teacher at one point.
Who dumped a truckload of fizzies into the varsity swim meet?
Into the body bags with you.
Amazing, Murd. That's great.
And I did remember that there was a recent interest in the movie, and that was Paramount. Paramount had an interest in 2021.
J.J. Abrams, wasn't it J.J. Abrams? That's right. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And nothing's been heard of since then. But so there's always hope out there for that to happen. So
yeah, you never know. And frankly, hey, if Hasbro and Marvel are playing nice, maybe a licensing agreement could be made for there to be some sort of animated or live action movie using the Micronauts of Marvel lore in some. Nah, it's probably not going to happen, but you never know. I mean,
but Ian, you make a valid point. If they're reprinting this big omnibus,
oh yeah. Yeah,
that could be, an omen for something coming down the pike.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's a reopening of negotiations, shall we call
Certainly.
it?
Yeah.
New comic books I could see happening. Marvel doesn't really play nice with. Let me rephrase that. Disney doesn't really play very nice with other companies for their movies. So that would probably be a no-go. They either buy things or they don't do them. That's the way Disney works, unfortunately. So,
Ryan, back to the comics. I wanted to ask, because I've read bits and pieces, but I haven't read the whole series, whereas you have. And I know Mantlo wrote virtually the entire series, I think, except maybe the last issue or something like that.
The very last issue is the only one he did not write.
And then they did the New Adventures, which was the second volume, which he did not write, correct?
Right. It was Peter B. Gillis.
Okay, he was a good writer as well.
So with art by a very young Kelly Jones, actually.
That's right.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Ryan, what is your general take of the whole series in terms of its quality?
I mean, I adore the entire series. Now, granted, I do have some nostalgia because this was the series I was like, okay, I'm going to make this my series. This is my grail to search to get the whole series. But I loved it. Because the other thing I love with the series that they did was they introduced characters down the line.
The demon character, right?
The devil.
Yeah, the devil, that's right.
Devil character. Literally, he's named the devil. He's not the devil. He's more like he's more like a beast character of the X-Men. There was Hunter,
right. That's right.
Who I absolutely loved. He was just he was a being who got basically tortured by Karza, and he was like manipulated and everything else to where he was just this humanoid looking, clay looking thing with purple metal boots. I don't know, but and then there was another, I'm trying to remember her name, but there was another, there was like a female roboid that was introduced.
Nanotron, maybe?
Yes.
Bird clutch as always.
Thank you. So I love the fact that they would occasionally bring these new characters in that really still felt like they were all part of the Micronauts family. And their adventures became more adventures. And you explored a lot more of the microverse. They had, you learn the origin of Bug, you learn the origin of Acquair, they would have in the back areas, they'd have tales of the microverse. So you got to explore more of this world that was being created. So, and to your point, Mantlo was there for all of it. So it was his vision the entire time. So that's, I think, why I enjoy it so much, is because it didn't change hands left and right and people trying to put their own stamp on it. It was his vision all the way through.
Like Larry Hama with G.I. Joe, Shane.
Right.
Yeah, very much so. But now, why didn't he write the last issue?
I was just going to say, that there has to be a story behind that, because it went 59 issues. Not 60, 59 issues.
Right.
And Peter T. Gillis wrote that final issue. Butch Geist was on the artwork. And you would just think that, the man who did it all would finish it out, unless, and I'm literally putting words into people's mouths here, and I don't want to, create any apocryphal words, but I'm wondering if Marvel wanted to go in a direction that he didn't want to go with the last issue, because that's quite literally the only thing I can think of, unless he was that busy at that point where he just quite literally couldn't do it.
To my knowledge, and again, I don't know this for sure, to my knowledge, he was just ready to move on to some other things, and Marvel wanted to continue. When he left, it was decided that they'll do one more issue to kind of wrap things up and then start the new adventures later on. In the last issue that Mantlo did, there's this beautiful piece on the back. I told you how they do an artwork and everything else, but they have this piece with Mantlo basically surrounded by his characters and him leaving. It's an absolutely fantastic piece. But it says, the mighty Micronauts bid a fond farewell to their creator, boisterous Bill Mantlo, And you have Hunter, the character I was mentioning earlier, say, may the Enigma Force be with you. That's not Star Wars at all. And you have, we got come on, buddy, we got to get some swashbuckling to do. Send-offs make me so sad. So it's, yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful piece. And it's very fitting for the time that he put into the Micronauts there.
I take it back. It probably wasn't bad terms or anything like that, because I don't think they would ever wind up doing something like this if it was bad terms.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, did he go on the Swashbuckler? Isn't that a reference to a book he did after that? What was it called? Not Saga of the Swashbucklers, or I'm brain farting right now.
I think I know which one you're talking about, and I can't think of it either.
That may be what they're referencing there.
Yeah.
Again, I know we're going to start to wind up, but the just to reemphasize what happened to Bill Mantlo, how tragic it is, and just to really, I think these stories just make people aware of what a talented writer he was, what a voice he had in comics, and for that period of time, he was really turning out just outstanding work.
Agreed.
Rom, Hulk, Micronauts, and then Sword of the Swashbucklers. Thank you. There you go.
Yep.
Ian, once again, L. Levinstein.
With the other guys, for that matter, with Jackson guys.
Yep.
Well,
No, they're the same person.
Oh,
yeah, Butch and Jackson are the same. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I fall for that all the time. I always think they're brothers, and then I'm like, no. Sometimes he goes by Butch, sometimes he goes by Jackson. There we go.
And Ryan, didn't Geist work on later on the Micronauts too?
Yes, he did.
He did. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, as stated, he was on that last issue, and he definitely did at least do that Mantlo piece at the end of it.
Yep. Yeah. He was, I believe, on the last few issues of it, 2 or 3 issues of it, and then he did that piece. So.
Yep.
Ryan, do you have any Micronauts original artwork or sketches?
I do not.
Okay.
Believe me, that is something that if I ever had the opportunity, I would imagine. Well, you never know, though. I was going to say it's not like it's Spider-Man or something like that. So, I mean, I was going to say, like, if I ever did come across it, it'd probably be out of my price range. But it's not like people are clamoring for original Micronauts artwork either. So
Not yet.
Right, not yet.
Yeah.
But that's why I was so interested in the artist edition, because I was like, oh, I would love to have this. And it just wasn't in the budget at the time. And then it was impossible to find afterwards.
Well,
So.
and there's got to be some people clamoring for it in some way for that book to be that high.
Sure.
Well, they probably had a very limited print one, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So hopefully they'll bring it back.
Yeah, I hope so.
Here's a good question to throw out there. In the amazing world of what ifs, if they were to bring the Micronauts back, specifically if they were to bring them back into the Marvel Universe, do you have a dream team that you'd like to see take on the Micronauts? And for that matter, any Marvel characters that they haven't crossed over with that you would like to see them cross over with?
Great question.
I've been thinking about that earlier, and I think I'd like to see Greg Pak write it.
That would be a great one.
Yeah.
He's been writing Darth Vader for years now, so he can, with Karza, he's got a Vader-like character that he can do stuff he couldn't do with Vader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep.
I'd like to see, thinking of Darth Vader, Kieran Gillen.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yep.
Write
That'd be
Micronauts. His Darth Vader comic is one of the best Star Wars comics I've ever read, period. I think Shane would back me up on that one.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
I think maybe Dan Abnett, I think, would do a damn good job.
Oh,
I think so too.
Without question, yeah.
Yep.
I think if you wanted to get the convolutedness appropriate convolutedness, I think you get Hickman on it.
Oh, wow.
I love Hickman. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I'm just saying he can.
So he'd go into the mysticism of the Micronauts.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And social commentary in place too.
He also likes stupid acronyms, so that also
Yes. Now my dream team would be, and this probably never happened, but I will tell you it would be a dream team to work on it for me. Was I would love to see Tinian writing it.
Okay.
And I would love, this is where it wouldn't happen, but I would love to see Jason Fabok drawing it.
Wow, man. Ooh.
Because he can do this bombastic, epic type of panels that just, I would love to see something like that.
Forgetting craziness, would you have thought like Grant Morrison from the Animal Man to JLA days?
During those days, yes. Today's days, no.
Yeah, no, not although, like, just thinking about what he did with oh my god, it's one of my favorite JLA stories.
Rock of Ages.
Rock of Ages.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And for that matter, thinking about how he's drawn the Power Rangers and did a damn good job with it, and he's one of my favorite artists today. Dan Mora would do. Would do such a good job on the Micronauts.
Yeah, great pick.
Go Micronauts. Yeah.
Along that art style, Evan Doc Shaner would be fantastic.
Ooh. Yep. So. Have him draw everything as far as
yes. Oh yeah, I agree. I totally agree.
Yep.
I got to talk with him at Baltimore Con this year and had him sign my Future Quest trade paperbacks.
Oh wow.
And I got to talk to him about why they weren't able to continue, and it was basically some of the other titles that were Hanna-Barbera went in directions that they weren't as comfortable with. So they pulled back the license, which included Future Quest, which was one of my all-time favorite series ever created. So
because they're doing so much with those properties right now.
Right.
I love when Shane gets bitter.
Now, Ian, to answer your other question, who do I think that they should cross over with? I mean, the obvious one for me is the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh, yes. 100%. 100%. Along those lines, could you imagine a storyline involving Silver Surfer and Galactus trying to devour the Microverse?
Oh, that'd be fantastic. Yeah.
That would be a snack.
Yeah, it's a little appetizer for
like a tapa.
Exactly.
I love it.
I say Squirrel Girl.
Yes.
There you go.
Squirrel Girl crossing over with everything. I'm A-okay with that.
I mean, it works perfectly with all the squirrels and they're down to their size, and I think that would be perfect. So
That's true. That's true. Yep. Puck from Alpha Flight. There we go. He's already small.
There you go.
Animated series Wolverine. He's small and Australian.
I love when Ian does like stature jokes. All right.
Yes. Good times. All right, gentlemen. Anything else we wanted to bring up on this micro spotlight before we finish it off?
I just want to say I'm very proud of us because with a giant size man thing out there, no one made a joke about a micro man thing being out there now. Oh, wait. That just happened.
Oh, wait. And you know what? One more thing that I'll bring up, and it also relates a little bit to you, Ryan, because one of the last times that we had you on was for the Book of the Month Club of The Star Wars. You know,
yes.
the original rough draft screenplay version of Star Wars, and I could see some comparisons to even that. You know, with what we have with the Micronauts. In fact, some even more so than the actual version of Star Wars that we got. So,
I agree. Yeah, completely.
Yep. So to tie that back in, it's like we only have Ryan on when we have stories of that.
Well,
go ahead.
I remember. Please. I was just gonna say. I just remember when you all first mentioned doing this. I immediately was on Facebook going, "If you guys do this, please have me on." Don't understand how much Micronauts means to me.
Oh my god!
And I was glad you remembered and reached out. I appreciate it very much.
Well, we're really grateful you're on because you brought great insight and history to the whole discussion.
Been invaluable.
Absolutely.
A couple of hours, Ryan.
Yes.
And I feel a lot better about now than when I started.
Good.
After talking about it.
Good. And I do want to see where it goes from here. I'm hoping that as part of this licensing agreement that future Micronauts issues past what they collect wind up on Marvel Unlimited, because that would be my preferred way of reading it digital.
I'll agree with you there, but I would take normal size trade paperbacks.
Oh, absolutely.
Also,
what?
No omnibus for Shane.
Not omnibus. No.
Nothing ginormous.
Ian, is anything for Micronauts on Marvel Unlimited now or no?
I don't believe so. I think the only thing that's on there would be the offhanded Micron appearances of the Micronauts, past that. So no ROM, no Micronauts, because they don't have the rights to publish it. So that's, or at least they didn't. So.
Yeah, I did look to see if they're out there on Unlimited, and I did not find them. You can, to your point, you can find the Arcturus Rand character and stories that they appear in and everything, but yeah, you cannot find the actual Micronauts. Although I'm hoping now with the omnibus coming out that will change. So
yeah, agreed. Entirely.
Although I did notice when I was doing some quick research on Marvel Wiki, they do have entries for the stories.
Okay.
From this series.
Good.
Okay.
With cover art and so forth.
Sure.
So.
That's good.
Good to hear.
Step in the right direction.
Yep, definitely.
Gentlemen, this is an honor. Thank you all for participating in this. This was a great time.
Absolutely, and thank you again, Chris, for suggesting this in the first place. This was well worth it, my friend. Well worth it.
You know I love to proselytize. Come
on. Before we wrap things up, Ryan, feel free to pimp your wares and let people know where they can find you.
Sure. Absolutely. So, well, first, one of the things I do is I host a podcast. We've been going 14 years strong. And Star Joe's, where we have covered the first 3 issues of Micronauts in detail, because one of my co-hosts, John Thurman, is a huge Micronauts fan as well. So we need to get back to covering issue by issue, but that was a lot of fun to do. And then the other thing I will bring up is, of course, I have created my own story, and we are working on issue 3 right now of Stealth Hammer. So it's a superhero adventure comic, all ages, that takes place in a world of high-tech gadgetry and supernatural mythology. I relate it to Stargirl in the world of Mega Man meets Jim Henson's Creature Shop. And you can find it at stealthhammer.com. You can buy the issues there. You can learn a little bit more about the characters and the origin of it. And like I said, we are working on issue 3 right now. Probably we'll have a Kickstarter, I'm saying probably late January for it. But I've been blessed. I mentioned Robert Atkins earlier, who worked on the Micronauts issue. He did a variant cover for issue 1 for me. I had Chrissy Zullo do a variant cover for issue 2. Issue 3, her husband, Chris Ominga, has done a cover for issue 3 for me. And I spoke to Katie Cook at Baltimore Comic Con, and she agreed that she'd be willing to do another cover for issue 3 for me. However, she has had a lot going on in her life lately, and so I do not blame her at all for not being able to get back in touch with me with that. But Katie, if you're listening, I wish you well. Hope everything is going much smoother for you, and whenever you're able to reach back out to me, I greatly appreciate it, because I am a huge fan of her artwork and would absolutely kill to have her doing a cover for us. So,
sure.
But yeah, I love being able to create my own stories now. And if anyone's interested in it, it's out there at stealthhammer.com. I am also, one of the things I'm going to be doing, and hopefully the first chapter of this will be out before the end of the year, is I will be writing some prose stories in my world of Stealth Hammer that will be free on the website for people to read. And every few months I'll add a new chapter and everything else. So
That's cool.
it's a way to get more stories out there. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing up Katie, by the way, because speedy recovery in general, Katie. Get well. One of my favorite parts of New York Comic Con is walking by her table, seeing her completely busy, me just waving at her, and she waves back, and then I walk by 3 more times that weekend, and it was weird not seeing her there this time around. So get well soon, Katie. We're thinking of you. You're awesome, and that's that.
Yes.
Yep. Awesome. All right. And I think that's just about that. So once again, patreon.com/Comic Geek Speak. We thank you so much for your continued support of the show in any way that you happen to give it. We really do appreciate that. And once again, for as little as $1 a month, you can go ahead and join in on the fun. Patreon.com/Comic Geek Speak. And once again, Ryan, thank you very much, man. It's
thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
It wouldn't have been the same without you.
It was a pleasure.
Okay.
Walk with Dallin and sepsis, my friend.
Dallin and sepsis.
Walk with Dallin and sepsis.
I'm sorry. Every time I hear sepsis, I think to myself, he named that after a problem that you have.
Yeah. I was thinking that too.
I'm shocked there wasn't a character named like Coccyx just to throw in there. Like, all right, Shane, over to you for the end credits.
Okie dokie. Visit us at comicgeekspeak.com to send us an email. The address is comicgeekspeak@gmail.com. To leave a voicemail, the number is 267-702-6642. Stop by thecomicforums.vanillacommunity.com. Look us up on YouTube at youtube.com/comicgeekspeak. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, send in your metal to Merds. Thanks to everyone again for contributing to the show. We couldn't do it without you. Thank you to Ryan for appearing. And as always, we are uniting the world's mightiest heroes, one listener at a time.
I look forward to the eventual adventures of Muffin and Coffin.
It's the 80s.